Hello, everyone, and thank you for checking out this special episode of Really Dicey. This is Manny, and I'm here with.
Craig Campbell.
If you haven't heard of Nerdburger Games, really check it out. They got some fantastic set of so many different type of games. Low Six is one of my personal favorites. If you're into comedy and vampires, um, and but Capers is one of your oldest role playing games that you've done, and that's a pulp style game, isn't it? It's a 1920s superhero game.
Yeah, it was the second game from Nerdburger Games, and it's kind of the flagship game in that it has like a whole kind of game line to it, and it's the core game. The original game is superpowered gangsters in the 1920s, so kind of street level superpowered kind of stuff. Nobody's like mind controlling a city or anything like that. But it can be played very pulpy. You can play it very action oriented. You can play it kind of heist focused. You can play it kind of political, about like kind of rising up through the gangster organizations and trying to make your fortune and so forth. Yeah, that's where a lot of stuff in the Nerdburger Games catalog started.
Mm. But today we're going to talk about your latest project dealing with Capers Cyberpunk. So,
Yes.
so I'm assuming it's like, is it? Well, actually, I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't assume. Is it still the 1920s? Is it the 2120s? What can you tell us about this project?
Um, yeah, Caper Cyberpunk is like a super powered RPG of cyberpunks fighting the megacorps in like an alternate present day. So the Caper story begins in the 1920s. Supers start showing up. And there's a whole history that kind of gets developed through that, and there's other supplements that take you through some of these historical periods, and it ultimately kind of leads you to this alternate version of the 2020s, so 100 years later. And super powered people and super smart people and super tech and all of that sort of thing has risen to the led to the rise of the megacorps. And the mega corporations control a great deal of the world. They have most of the populace kind of under their thumb. They have subsumed many governments and law enforcement agencies, and it's kind of these massive corporations are in control. And the only people that can really stop them and take a bite out of what they're doing are the superpowered criminals who refuse to register their powers and who are therefore, by definition, outlaws. And that's who you play in the game, or you can play other characters kind of adjacent to that. But at the heart of it are these superpowered criminals living in the shadows and on the edge of society.
That's awesome. If I may ask, where did the ideas for this come from? I'm always curious to know where your mind goes when you make your games.
Well, it was when Capers first happened, and then there was like coming out of the Kickstarter, there were people who were wondering if there were going to be supplements, and then I decided, okay, so we'll produce some supplements, and in the process of doing that, kind of hit on the idea of taking the game, like here's material in a book in a supplement that is like you can use it in the core game, it expands things, there's tools for GMs, there's new options and powers and things for characters, but it also presented this story in this alternate setting. And so like Capers Noir sets you in the 40s and makes the game sort of a crime noir drama thriller with investigation rules and the kind of things lurking in the shadow, people like mysteries and things lurking in the shadow, and people smoking under street lights, and like all the crime noir stuff, right? And then I just kind of developed into other things as we went along, and I started to see this progression of what is essentially always cops and robbers with superpowers, and just how it evolves over time to kind of hit on different subgenres. And it seemed like with the progression of technology and so forth that begins in Capers Covert, where you get like super spy gadgets and miniaturization of technology, that it just like, okay, now technology is starting to get smaller and personal, and that kind of makes you think about cyber tech and like like that sort of technology that's very personal, like characters who are wearing technology in and on their bodies. And ultimately, cyberpunk games are very much often about like the oppression of the class, the lower classes, the 1% elite and powerful who have everything. And it's like, characters in cyberpunk stories are often living outside the law in some way, shape, or form anyway. So they're effectively criminals, and the megacorps are effectively the law because they subsume governments. So that was like, well, it's a natural progression to take it to that, because it's, cyberpunk games can often be sort of law enforcement versus those who live outside the law. Anyway, which is what I'm saying, cops and robbers with superpowers. But in the great thing about Capers Cyberpunk is that it puts actual change in the hands of the characters, because superpowers have the ability to kind of, you actually can affect change more easily than perhaps in some cyberpunk games where you've got capabilities that aren't normally available. And then also the technology and the fact that you have sheer numbers. Like Capers Cyberpunk does speak quite a bit to the idea of helping your community, organizing other activist groups and street militias and things like that, and people that are fighting the megacorps. It's kind of set up as this disparate group of factions in the game. And like, if you were to play the game and start to organize these groups so that they actually started to work together in coordinated efforts, like you can have a real impact and actually hurt mega corporations right at their core. And maybe even take them down, or at least take one down, or make things significantly better, or, whatever you can do.
So, when it comes to the book itself, is it styled or formatted similar to the previous Caper role-playing games? Is it, how do you know yet how big the book will be?
Yeah, it's looking to be 168-ish pages. That might change, but that's kind of where it's at, which is about the size of Capers. It's an all-in-one game book. With the other supplements, those were smaller, and those were kind of like, well, here's everything you need that's different from Capers. Like you can use the core book plus this supplement to do this other kind of subsetting of the game. Whereas with Capers Cyberpunk, it felt like it was far enough far enough away and off into the future, and there's so much that's different in the game world that it kind of deserved its own treatment. So it's a full rule book with all the rules, character creation, GM tools and advice and all that sort of thing, and then a whole setting that's built around this alternate version of the 2020s New York City with all 5 boroughs and what's happening there.
When I talk to other writers who've done cyberpunk books, they tell me that the biggest headache they have is technology. Was technology a challenge for you as well?
It was, to an extent that, like, I basically looked at other cyberpunk games and thought about, okay, well, what sorts of things are incorporated into cyberpunk games? What are people going to be expecting for cyber tech and biotech and nanotech and those types of things? And so I had to generate those things, but then also mesh those with the superpower capabilities that the characters have without having the two step on each other's toes too much. You don't want to do a piece of cyber tech that's kind of too much like a power, or vice versa, because they start to lose their identity a little bit. So there's there were some care taken in that, and the tech never gets kind of to the level of capability of the superpowers. The game is still very much a game that features superpowered characters, so the tech augments all of that, but the superpowers are kind of where it's at. That said, it's very possible for you to build a character that has superpowers and also has some cyber tech that interacts in interesting ways. And the game has added powers that are specifically geared toward, like, you can attack somebody's cyber tech. There's powers that allow you to mess with electronics and cyber tech and things like that.
So when it comes to the amount of superpowers, is it the same amount, would you say, that Capers allows? Is there more new things when it comes to powers or anything like that?
Capers Cyberpunk includes nearly every power from the Capers game, plus a few powers that seemed very appropriate that I pulled from other supplements that have been done. Like just like this power really needs to be like in the Cyberpunk game to, so that people don't have to go and buy the supplement to necessarily get it. And then there's a dozen or so brand new ones. So there's significantly more powers in the Cyberpunk game book than there was in Capers. I think I'm close to 50 powers total, including some ones that you've never seen before. Some of which are very cyberpunk and futuristic oriented, and some that are just like, oh, I never got around to making a power where you like create, you can create like porcupine quills, like quill generation, and be like, that type of superhero that can pop quills out of their body. And what can you do with those? Can you fling them? Can you protect yourself? Can you attack with them? Can you climb with them?
What about when it comes to NPCs and villains? What does the book offer?
The game focuses the villain side of things is very much the 12 mega corporations. There are 12 described in the game book. And then when you go through the New York City setting, a great many of the NPCs that are provided, some of them are people that are just regular people that are trying to kind of get by in their communities. Some of them are people that are actively fighting the megacorps, and then there are a variety of NPCs that are presented who are mega corporation personnel. They are executives and agents and R&D developers and military types and corporation cops and things like that. And there's there's hooks for all of them, and they're all presented in such a way that it's like, here's interesting things you can do with these characters, with these NPCs, including some of them that are like double agents that are working against their own mega corporation to benefit another corp, or to try to, they've had second thoughts and they're trying to help the populace. So you could find, like you as a character could potentially discover these moles inside of the mega corporations, and that might be a way to kind of take a swing at some of them. There's a pretty wide variety, and then there's a whole slew of like NPC stat blocks that are kind of generic, that are like similar to how Capers included. Like you need a stat block for an assassin or a vigilante or a corp cop. Those are available.
So let's talk about the crowdfunding. So this is going to be a crowdfunded project where people can come in and try to not bid. What's the word I'm looking for?
Pledge.
Pledge, yes. So yes, tell us about it. I believe the last few months you've done, you don't do too many stretch goals because it could hurt the project, if I remember correctly.
Well, I've done ones without stretch goals or without too many, and I've done ones where you kind of had the minimum, like what I would refer to as the minimum viable product. Like, here's as slim as the game can be, and we'll kind of shoot for that goal, and we'll see if we can add more content to it. And so I'm doing some of that with Capers Cyberpunk, but since it's drawing from so much history and so much stuff that kind of really needs to be there in order to kind of be a proper culmination of this 100-year story, the stretch goals are going to be geared more around, I've been in contact with a number of people and have some folks lined up to write adventures for the game. And if all goes well, we will turn out a series of adventures that you'll get as part of the rewards to the book, which is kind of its own thing there as well. And then if we do particularly well, then we'll get like the full artwork treatment, and we'll put them in a soft cover book, and you'll be able to get a hold of that book. You'll get the PDF for sure of all the adventures, and then like potential of getting the if you want a physical copy, you can get a physical copy at cost. So it'll just cost you a few bucks to get it printed, like no profit involved. Just, but that's just a matter of kind of doing it the way Kickstarter lets us do things or doesn't let us do things, or, it's logistics too. And I don't know if, we'll get to the point of being able to put it into a book, but at the very least, you'll get like some number of adventures. If things go even slightly well with the Kickstarter.
When it comes to the rules of the game, is it very similar to Capers? And for those that don't know what, haven't played Capers yet, does it use the typical dice set that other game systems use?
No, Capers Cyberpunk uses the same system as Capers and all the other supplements. It's a playing card based game. No dice are involved at all. And the basics of it is that every player and the GM has their own deck of cards with two jokers. And when you're going to attempt something, you have your trait score, which might be 1 or 2 or 3, and might be higher if you have a super, like if you're super strong, you might have a 5. And that number defines like the number of cards that you get in the game. It's called card count. So if you're going to attempt something, you'll have a card count that might be 2 or 3 or 4, and that's reflective of how good you are at something. Higher is better. And you flip one card at a time versus a target score that the GM knows that you don't. So it's a little bit of a gamble, kind of like what could my target be? And the pip value on the card determines success or failure, and the suit determines the degree of success or failure. So you could flip the king of clubs, which will almost certainly be successful because a king is a very high card, but clubs is the worst suit. And so that flip will come with a complication, even though you're successful. So do you stick with that, or do you flip another card and lose that king, which is probably successful, and potentially get a better success or potentially fail? And you can keep doing that until you decide to stick with the card, or you get stuck with your last card.
Excellent.
And then Caper Cyberpunk utilizes all of that, and the core rule system is pretty much the same. The game allows you to get more powerful than in Capers. It's broken down into 5 levels. In Capers, in Cyberpunk, you go up to 10. And once you hit 6th level and up, for example, as if you're a superpowered character, you get access to a couple of, you've got a series of them to choose from, but you'll only be able to choose a few. Things called evolutions, which is like your superpowers evolve to the point that you can do something really that's brand new, that's like not been seen before in the game. The one that I like the most, that I've seen players and playtesters enjoy the most, is an evolution boost. In the game, your character, your powers, you've got boost. You've got the standard effect of the power, and then boost, which are things that can make the power better or do like other cool related things. Whereas an evolution boost is like a jacked up version of that. So like your character suddenly can do something like they can use 3 boosts at once on their power for the cost of only 1, or they gain some boost ability that is otherwise not described and is kind of unique. For example, there's a power that allows you to change shape into different animals, but you can only change shape into like one different kind of animal. And you start with weaker animals and you get to stronger animals. And then the evolution boost, the evolution boost for that allows you to take on the qualities of 2 of those animals. So you turn into like a hybrid of those 2 things. So you could be, a wolf that flies like a falcon and has talons and claws and a beak and wings, but is also still a wolf and has all the wolf abilities. And that's an example.
Oh, okay. So if I may ask, the cyberpunk like genre, it's one of those genres that it doesn't go away since it came, I guess, in popularity. I would say like maybe the early 80s. Why do you think that genre of science fiction is prevailing still to this day?
Oh, that's a very good question. I think there's probably a number of reasons. I think societies, well, let's get the obvious one out of the way first. Is often it looks really cool, right? It's a stylistic and really kind of wonderfully aesthetic kind of look to things. Like that's certainly a draw. I think that people, the obsession with technology and what technology might do for us and how technology might change our lives is something that makes cyberpunk very interesting. And then also kind of the flip side of like how technology might change us for the worse, and how like there are things that could happen with technology that aren't necessarily so good, and being worried and wanting to be wary of those types of things. And I think, stories of struggle and overcoming oppression in general are, are stories that we as human beings really enjoy. Like we'd like to see people win in a battle against, something big and powerful and difficult to survive against. Like it's David versus Goliath. It's the battle of the little tiny person who takes on the giant, who takes on the big entity or the dragon or what, like it goes as far as like, yeah, the knight fighting the dragon. And mega corporations are big, faceless, terrible monsters that we can kind of like, we can all hate together. And that, like fighting against that, and having characters that are struggling against that together, make for really worthwhile stories and tell us very specific and very real things about the human experience.
Hmm. So yeah, when is this available?
Well, the Kickstarter either goes or will go live on. I'm not sure when we're posting this, um, but yeah, it's up. The Kickstarter goes up September 12th. It'll run for roughly a month, and a lot of what's in the book is kind of nailed down or very nearly so. So it should fulfill pretty quickly. After that, we'll have to kind of get the adventures together and get those edited. And if we get as far as to like make artwork and stuff for them too, that there's a bit of work to be done there, but that's stuff that can happen like while the core book is going through pre-production and actual printing and shipping and all that sort of thing. So it'll take a few months, but we'll get there, and it'll be a relatively quick turnaround. I don't expect this to be a Kickstarter that takes like a year plus to get into your hands. It should be quite a bit faster than that.
All right, excellent. Well, I'll put all that information in the description below as well, the links and everything. Thank you, Craig, for taking the time to talk to us about your latest project. I'm always excited to hear about what you've come up with. So yes, viewers, thank you for watching. Stay safe out there. Have a good day.
Bye, everybody. Thanks, Manny.